My name's Jake, and I've lived out here in the quiet hills of rural Kentucky all my life. I'm not a city guy like the peace and space, the kind you only find miles from the nearest town. My best friend and constant companion is Diesel, a big, loyal German shepherd who's been with me since he was a puppy. We've got a bond that's hard to put into words. He's not just a dog to me, he's family. Our community here is small, almost like a hidden pocket where everyone knows everyone, but folks mostly keep to themselves. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave politely but don't pry. I always thought that was just the way things should be: quiet, respectful, and peaceful. That's why when a new family moved in last spring, I took notice. They had a couple of dogs that roamed freely and didn't seem to care much about fences or boundaries. At first I shrugged it off, new people settling in, figuring things out. But Diesel didn't like it. The dogs would sneak over to our side, barking and sniffing around like they owned the place. Something about those careless dogs stirred something in me, an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. The kind of feeling that tension is quietly growing, like the calm before a storm you just know is coming. It started small. A few times Diesel would bark from the back porch, alerting me that the neighbor's dogs had wandered onto our property. Again, they weren't just curious, they were bold. One afternoon I caught them digging under the fence, their muddy paws ruining my garden. Diesel was right there, growling deep in his throat, his protective instincts kicking in. I tried to handle it calmly. I went over to the neighbors, told them about the dogs and the damage. "Please keep your dogs on your property," I said, hoping for a reasonable response. But they laughed it off, saying their dogs were friendly and just playing. I could tell they didn't take me seriously, like I was some troublemaker making a fuss. The dogs kept coming over, and Diesel wasn't having it. One day, the neighbor's bigger dog cornered Diesel near the fence, barking aggressively. Diesel stood his ground, muscles tense, ready to defend our space. I could see it was only a matter of time before things got out of hand. Sure enough, the next day I found Diesel limping badly. One of the neighbor's dogs had attacked him. The wounds weren't life-threatening, but they were bad enough to send Diesel to the vet. I was furious and scared. I'd warned them, but they ignored me. The peaceful quiet we once had was shattered, replaced by a simmering anger that neither side seemed willing to calm down. The neighbors acted like nothing was wrong, but I knew better. Something had shifted, and I could feel the tension crackling in the air. This wasn't just about dogs anymore, it was personal. One late afternoon it happened. Diesel was outside, and those neighbor dogs slipped through a broken part of the fence. They charged at him with no warning. The fight was quick but brutal. I ran outside just in time to pull Diesel away, but not before he'd been seriously injured. Deep cuts, puncture wounds and bruises all over his body. My heart sank seeing him trembling, barely able to stand. I scooped him up and rushed him to the vet, my hands shaking. Diesel's usually so strong and proud, but now he looked so fragile. The vet said it would be a long road to recovery, and I knew it was going to be tough for both of us. When I confronted the neighbors, they acted like it wasn't a big deal. Our dogs wouldn't hurt anyone, they insisted. Maybe your dog provoked them. Their words felt like a slap in the face. I demanded they take responsibility for their dogs and fix the fence, but they shrugged it off, refusing to even apologize. Days turned into weeks as Diesel healed slowly. I stayed by his side, watching every flinch and whimper. The pain in his eyes mirrored my own frustration. How could people be so careless and uncaring? The peaceful life I loved felt like it was slipping away, replaced by anger and worry. I knew this wasn't just a dogfight anymore. It was a battle over respect and boundaries, and I wasn't ready to back down. Then the threat started at first. There were subtle notes slipped under my door with warnings to stay quiet and mind my own business. I tossed them in the trash, refusing to be intimidated. But the messages kept coming, each one more menacing than the last. One night I found my backyard fence broken in 2 places. It looked like someone had been testing my defenses. On another night I heard strange noises, footsteps crunching. In the leaves, low growls that didn't belong to any animal around here. I stayed alert, but I wasn't afraid. Diesel was healing, and I was more determined than ever. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing, a dangerous game I didn't want to play but was being forced into. I told the neighbors I wasn't scared and warned them their threats wouldn't stop me from protecting Diesel and our home. They just smiled coldly and walked away. The tension between us was thick, like electricity before a lightning storm. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. One morning I woke up to find Diesel was gone. His food bowl was untouched, and the gate I was sure was locked was slightly ajar. Panic flooded through me as I ran outside, calling his name over and over. The cold breeze carried no sign of him, no bark, no rustle, nothing. I searched the whole neighborhood yelling for him, asking neighbors if they'd seen anything. Rumors started swirling quickly. Some whispered that the neighbors had taken Diesel, others said he might have run off scared, but I knew better. Those dogs had already attacked him once, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was at play. I noticed the neighbors acting oddly, avoiding eye contact, whispering when they thought I wasn't around. A few people in town told me they'd seen the neighbors' kids lurking near my property late at night. The fear that Diesel might never come home settled like a heavy stone in my chest. Every moment without Diesel was unbearable. The house felt empty, silent in a way it never had before. I felt betrayed not just by the neighbors, but by the whole community that seemed too afraid to stand up or help. I was left alone, desperate and helpless, holding on to hope but haunted by the worst. Days dragged on with no sign of him. I stayed up late, listening for any sound, any sign of my loyal friend returning. The suspense tightened like a noose. What had really happened to Diesel? Was he out there, hurt or worse? Or was this the start of something even more terrible? Then, the fire started. One night I was jolted awake by the smell of smoke. Rushing outside, I saw flames licking up the side of my backyard shed. The fire spread fast, swallowing up everything inside the tools. The old lawnmower, even some of Diesel's toys I'd kept. I called the fire department, but by the time they arrived, the damage was done. The neighbors watched from across the road, faces unreadable but eyes filled with something I couldn't trust. I was sure this wasn't an accident. The timing, the way the fire started, it felt like a clear message. They wanted me scared, cornered. But instead of breaking me, it made me angrier. I was more determined than ever to find out who was behind this and make them pay. Inside me a battle raged. Fear whispered to back down, to let it go. But justice roared louder. I couldn't lose Diesel and everything else without fighting back. The fire was a warning, but I wasn't about to give in. I started planning my next move, knowing the stakes had never been higher. The tension in the air was electric. And the quiet mountain valley I called home had turned into a battleground. After the fire and Diesel's disappearance, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The fear was real, but so was the anger burning. Inside me I spent nights pacing, weighing my options. I wanted to make them understand the pain they caused without losing myself in the process. I began planning carefully. This wasn't about destruction for destruction's sake. It was about sending a message, something symbolic that would hit home. A fire in their yard, a scare, something that mirrored what they had done to me without crossing the line into outright cruelty. I thought about the risks, the law, the chance of getting caught, the guilt that might come afterward. But every time I imagined Diesel's face, hurt and scared, I pushed those doubts aside. This was justice, not revenge born from hate. I mapped out their property in my mind, the times they left the house, the weak spots in their fence. I kept everything to myself, careful not to let suspicion grow around me. The tension built as I prepared, every step measured but fueled by a simmering rage. At the same time, I wrestled with regret. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do. I want to become the person who started this cycle of destruction. But I told myself this was different. It was about balance, about standing up for what was right. The night I chose was quiet, the perfect cover. My heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. The stakes had never been higher. I was ready to take back control, even if it meant walking a dangerous line. The night was thick with silence as I slipped out of the house, careful not to wake anyone. The moon cast pale light over the sleepy valley, shadows stretching across the neighbors' yard like dark fingers. I moved with purpose, every step calculated. I found the dry leaves near their back fence perfect kindling. With a small lighter and some gasoline I'd hidden earlier, I began the slow work of setting the fire. The flames caught quickly, crackling and growing, licking up the fence and the bushes nearby. I stood back, watching the fire dance, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and dread. The flames illuminated the house windows, and soon I saw a movement inside. The neighbors noticed, panic flashing in their eyes. I didn't wait for confrontation before the fire could get out of control. I slipped away, leaving behind a note on the fence. It was short, clear, a warning not to cross the line again. My message was delivered, but my identity remained hidden. Behind me, the quiet town stirred awake as sirens wailed in the distance. The neighbors scrambled, helpless against the blaze that was now burning their safe space. Fear and confusion rippled through the community like a shockwave. I felt the weight of what I had done, knowing the fallout was only beginning. Would they come after me? Would things escalate further? The suspense hung in the air, thick and suffocating. But for the first time since Diesel went missing, I felt a flicker of control. Revenge was a dangerous game, but sometimes it was the only language those people understood. In the days following the fire, the police arrived with questions, flashlights cutting through the smoky remnants of the neighbor's yard. They searched for clues, fingerprints, anything to point to who had started the blaze. But I was careful no evidence linked back to me. The investigation went cold quickly, leaving whispers and rumors to fill the silence. The community's reaction was mixed. Some sided quietly with me, tired of the neighbors' careless behavior and the tension that had grown for months. Others were uneasy, fearing that things would spiral further out of control. The once quiet neighborhood felt fractured, like a fragile line had been crossed. As I watched from a distance, I noticed a change. The neighbors became more cautious, quieter, some even packing up and leaving town. The power dynamic had shifted. They no longer felt untouchable. The message was clear. Amid all this, Diesel's fate finally came to light. After weeks of searching and heartbreak, He was found injured but alive, cared for by a kind stranger who had taken him in. The relief was overwhelming. Diesel's slow recovery became a symbol of resilience, not just for him, but for me as well. Reflecting on everything, I realized this was about more than just a dog or a property line. It was about loyalty, respect, and the consequences of crossing boundaries. When trust breaks down, destruction follows. And sometimes, standing your ground means fighting back, even when the cost is high. Revenge is a double-edged sword. It feels like justice when you're hurting, but it can blur the lines between right and wrong. Looking back, I don't regret standing up for Diesel or myself, but I also don't take pride in the destruction I caused. There's a lesson here for me and for anyone who listens. Respect your neighbors, respect their pets, and respect boundaries. When those lines are crossed, things can quickly spiral beyond control. I still wonder what could have happened if we had talked, if they had listened. Maybe none of this would have occurred. But some wounds run too deep, and sometimes silence is the loudest form of pain. Now, I'm left with the scars of what was lost, and the hope that Deez and I can heal together. The community may never be the same, but I've learned that loyalty, it means fighting for what you love, even when it's hard. So, to anyone out there, be careful where you draw your line, because once crossed, the consequences don't just fade away. They linger, like a shadow in the night, reminding you that some battles change everything.
That wraps up today's episode of r/Payback. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to subscribe for more epic stories.